Welcome to another deep dive. We're going to be exploring the world of divination today.
Oh, cool.
And we're going to be taking all our cues from a book called Divination for Beginners by Scott Cunningham.
Nice.
So I've always been fascinated by divination. It's a practice that goes back like, what?
Thousands of years.
Yeah, over 5,000 years.
Yeah.
It's really amazing to think that people have always wanted to know what the future holds.
It seems to be like a pretty basic human impulse.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what I find really interesting is that divination isn't just about, having some mystical psychic ability.
Right.
It's something that actually anyone can explore.
It really is more about, I think, understanding the method that you're using.
Right.
And then also, what those results could mean.
Absolutely. So before we get too far, let's just kind of define what exactly divination is.
Sure. Well, the book defines it as seeking knowledge of the future or the unknown
Okay.
by using various techniques.
So what kind of tech?
Well, I mean, we'll get into all the different techniques, but, it's things like, it could be anything from, looking at the stars or reading tea leaves
Okay.
or using a pendulum.
I see. So it's really about tapping into some kind of wisdom or knowledge that goes beyond our kind of everyday understanding.
Exactly. And that's, I think, what makes it so fascinating.
Yeah, totally. So now that we've kind of laid the groundwork, I think it'd be really cool to kind of go back in time a little bit
Oh, sure.
and look at how divination was practiced in ancient cultures.
Okay. Great.
So let's start in ancient Babylon.
Okay.
They had these specialized priests called Baru,
Uh-huh.
and they were experts in something called lichenomancy.
Lichenomancy, which sounds...
It's a mouthful, but it's fascinating.
Yeah, what is that?
So basically, they would look at oil droplets in water,
Okay.
and they would try to read patterns in those oil droplets.
And from that, they could, predict the future or... That's right. They could predict all sorts of things, from births to battles.
Wow.
Even business outcomes, and they could even help people find a good marriage match through lichenomancy.
That's I'm just imagining going to a priest and being like,
Find me a husband or...
who should I marry?
Exactly.
That's why
They would look at the oil and the water and say, oh yeah, he's the one.
he's over there.
That's the guy.
That's amazing. Okay, so they were using divination for these really practical purposes,
Uh-huh.
but it's also interesting to note that the Babylonians, they viewed omens as warnings.
Right. So if the prediction was kind of negative,
Okay.
they believed that they could actually do something about it.
Okay.
They had these purification rituals.
What kind of rituals?
They were called nemberbi.
Okay.
And it was basically a way of appeasing the gods or kind of warding off evil.
So it wasn't just about passively accepting whatever the prediction was.
Exactly. It was about taking action based on what they learned.
That's really interesting. So they had more of a participatory relationship with fate.
Right. It wasn't just this is going to happen.
Deal with it.
Exactly. They felt like they had some agency.
Okay, so now let's fast forward a little bit to ancient Rome.
All right.
They were also really into omens, but they took a bit of a different approach.
They did. They were very focused on everyday events and animal behavior.
Okay, so what? If a bird flew by a certain way?
That could be a sign.
Okay.
Or if you spilled your wine.
Oh, boss.
Or if there was a clap of thunder, anything like that.
So they were really looking for signs from the gods in the everyday world.
Exactly.
Wow, that must have made life very...
Anxious.
Yeah, anxious. Every little thing could be interpreted as some kind of message.
Right. And we actually have a great example of this with Augustus Caesar.
Oh, tell me.
He lost a sandal.
Okay.
And this was interpreted as an omen of military revolt.
What? Just from losing a sandal?
Just from losing a sandal.
Oh, my God.
And, he took it very seriously, as you can imagine.
So even someone as powerful as Caesar was still looking for these signs and trying to interpret them.
Absolutely. It was a huge part of their culture.
That's fascinating. Okay, so we've talked about Babylon. We've talked about Rome.
Mhm.
Let's hop over to Tibet.
Okay.
They have some really unique divination practices as well.
They do. They have something called tra, which is basically scrying.
Okay.
So gazing into a reflective surface.
Like a mirror.
Like a mirror or water.
Okay.
Or even the sky to try to see the future.
Wow. And they also have something called Tringbad divination.
Right, which uses a mala.
Which is
It's like a rosary, so it's beads on a string.
And that can be used for divination.
Yes, they have a whole system for how they use that.
Wow. But probably the most mind-blowing thing about Tibetan divination is that even the Dalai Lama is discovered through divination.
Yes, they use divination to help locate the reincarnation of the Dalai Lama.
That's just amazing. Okay, so we've traveled all over the world. We've looked at all these different practices.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious, like with so many different types of divination, how do people even begin to choose a method?
Well, that's a great question. And that's where understanding the different types of responses comes in.
Okay.
So the book outlines three main categories.
Okay.
You have binary responses,
Good.
symbolic responses, and selective responses.
All right, so let's start with binary. What is that?
That's the simplest.
Okay.
It's basically just a yes or no.
Oh, I see.
So something like flipping a coin
Okay.
or using a pendulum.
So it's a very straightforward kind of answer.
Exactly. It's very direct.
Okay, but how can you get like a meaningful answer with just a yes or no?
Well, it forces you to kind of break down the question
Okay.
into smaller yes or no steps.
I see.
So you might start with a broad question,
Right.
and then you kind of narrow it down.
Like a detective almost.
Exactly.
Okay, that's cool. So what about symbolic responses?
That's where it gets a little bit more complex
Okay.
because you're dealing with images or symbols.
Okay.
So things like looking at the clouds or gazing into a fire
Okay.
or reading tea leaves.
There's more about interpretation,
Exactly. You have to kind of decipher what those symbols mean.
and that can be pretty subjective, I imagine.
It can be, yeah. It depends on your own intuition and your understanding of those symbols.
Okay, so what about selective responses? What's that?
That's where you're choosing from predetermined options.
Oh, okay.
So think of drawing straws
Oh,
or pulling a card from a tarot deck.
So it's kind of like letting fate decide, but within a certain set of possibilities.
Exactly.
Okay, so we have these three different categories: binary, symbolic, and selective.
Right.
And I'm guessing there's no one best method.
Not necessarily. It really depends on, the individual,
Right.
the question they're asking.
And probably even like their personality.
Exactly. Some people really resonate with visual symbols, while others prefer that very direct yes or no.
Yeah, it's like choosing the right tool for the job.
Exactly.
All right, well, that gives us a great foundation for exploring all these different divination techniques.
Yeah.
I'm excited to dive into some specific examples.
Me too.
So stay tuned. We'll be right back after a quick break. All right, so we've talked about the different types of responses you can get in divination. But now I want to really dive into some specific methods.
Oh, yeah, let's do it.
Because there are so many out there.
There are so many. It's like a whole world.
Yeah, it can be kind of overwhelming.
It can be a little bit intimidating.
Yeah, so where do we even begin?
Oh, yeah.
What about fire? Fire divination?
Oh, yeah, that's pyromancy.
Pyromancy, okay.
Which is, it's one of the oldest forms.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
I've always been drawn to fire. It's so mesmerizing.
Yeah, and it's practiced by cultures all over the world.
Oh, wow.
So the basic idea is that you look at the flames,
Okay.
the sparks, the smoke,
Okay.
and you're looking for symbols and patterns.
Okay, so if the flame is really high, that means something, or?
It could, yeah, or if it flickers a certain way,
Okay.
or if the smoke drifts in a particular direction.
So different cultures would interpret those signs in different ways.
Exactly. It wasn't like a universal language,
Okay.
but they each had their own system of meaning.
Do you have any specific examples from different cultures?
Yeah. So, for example, the Semang people of Malaysia,
Right.
they used fire divination to determine the safety of a campsite.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So if the smoke rose straight up,
Yeah.
that was seen as a good omen, a sign that it was safe to stay.
Okay.
But if it drifted sideways, they would pack up and move on.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, so it's very practical.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But how do you know it's not just random flickering?
Right. Well, that's where the skill of interpretation comes in.
Okay.
You have to learn to distinguish between what's just random
Yeah.
and what might actually be a meaningful pattern.
I see. So it's kind of like reading the clouds.
Exactly. Yeah. Sometimes you see a bunny rabbit,
Mhm.
and sometimes it's just a blob.
Right, right. Okay, so fire's cool. What about candles?
Oh, candles. Yeah.
Because I feel like a lot of people use candles for divination.
They do. Yeah. And that's called lichnomancy,
Lichnomancy, okay.
which is basically candle divination.
So what do you look for when you're doing candle divination?
Well, you're observing the flame.
Yep.
You're looking at the shape of the flame, the brightness,
Okay.
how the wick burns,
Okay.
whether it's steady or flickering.
So a dim flame might mean something different than a really bright flame?
Exactly, yeah. So a dim flame might suggest caution,
Okay.
whereas a strong, steady flame might be seen as a sign of good fortune.
I see. And what about the way the wax melts?
Yeah, that can also be interpreted.
Oh, wow.
So, if the wax drips a certain way or if it forms certain patterns,
That can have meaning?
that can have meaning, yeah.
Okay, so candles are cool. What about water?
Water. Oh, yeah, that's hydromancy.
Hydromancy,
And that includes things like lecanomancy.
which is what the Babylonians were doing.
Exactly. So that's using oil and water.
Okay.
But you can also use water for scrying,
Scrying, okay.
which is basically gazing into a still body of water to receive visions or messages.
Oh, wow.
So you might use a bowl of water or a lake or even a mirror.
I've heard of people using like a black mirror for scrying.
Yeah, that's a common technique.
It's like the water is like a portal to another realm or something.
Yeah, it's like a way of accessing the subconscious mind.
Okay, so we've got fire, water. What about plants?
Plants. Oh, that's botanomancy.
Botanomancy.
And that can involve all sorts of things.
Okay.
You know, you could place certain plants under your pillow for prophetic dreams,
Okay.
or you could study the way a plant grows,
Okay.
or even use it as a pendulum.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, different plants are believed to have different energies or properties that can enhance the divination process.
Okay, so it's not just about like the physical plant itself, but also like the energy that it holds.
Exactly. Yeah, it's about tapping into that energy.
I love that. Okay, so we've got fire, water, plants. What about something a little bit more like structured? Like what about casting lots?
Oh, casting lots. Yeah.
I feel like I've seen that in movies.
Yeah, that's a very old and widespread method.
Okay.
It basically involves using objects,
Okay.
like dice or stones or sticks,
Okay.
to make a random selection.
And then you interpret that selection.
Exactly. Yeah, you let fate decide,
Okay.
and then you interpret the results based on the system that you're using.
So like the I Ching would be considered a form of lot casting.
Yeah, because you're tossing the euro stocks,
Right.
and then you're consulting the book to interpret the hexagram.
Okay, so it's like a combination of chance and interpretation.
Exactly. Yeah, you're surrendering to a higher power,
Okay.
but you're also using your own knowledge and intuition to understand the message.
I like that. Okay, so what about mirrors?
Mirrors. Oh, yeah, that's catatromancy,
Cachapromancy.
which is mirror divination.
Okay.
And that's been around for centuries.
I feel like mirrors have always been associated with like magic and mystery.
They have, yeah. They're seen as a portal to other worlds.
So what do you do with a mirror in divination?
Well, you basically gaze into the mirror
Okay.
and you try to see visions of the future.
Okay.
And you might try to see the activities of your enemies.
A little creepy,
A little bit creepy, yeah.
but also kind of cool.
Yeah, but again, it's all about interpretation.
Right.
What one person sees as a threatening figure, another person might see as a protective spirit.
Okay, so it's really subjective.
It is? Yeah, very much so.
Okay, what about the stars?
The stars. Oh, yeah, that's astrology,
Astrology.
which is a vast and complex system.
I've always been fascinated by astrology,
Yeah, it's a fascinating subject.
but it's a lot more than just reading your horoscope.
It is, yeah. It's based on the idea that the positions of the planets and stars at the time of your birth can influence your personality and your life path.
Okay.
So it's about recognizing those connections
Right.
between the cosmos and our individual lives.
Wow, so it's really about understanding the bigger picture.
Exactly, yeah. It's about seeing ourselves as part of a larger whole.
Okay, so we've got mirrors, we've got stars. What about something a little closer to home? What about our hands?
Our hands, oh yeah, that's palmistry,
Palmistry.
which is the art of reading the lines and shapes of your hands
Okay.
to gain insight into your personality, your talents, your potential.
Okay, so you can actually tell something about a person just by looking at their hands.
According to palmistry, yes.
Wow, so it's like our hands hold a map of our lives.
In a way, yeah, they tell a story.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of different methods here.
We have.
From fire and water to plants, lots, mirrors, stars, even our own hands.
The possibilities are endless.
Yeah, it's amazing, but I'm just curious, is there like a wrong way to approach divination?
Well, I think the most important thing is to approach it with respect
Right.
and a genuine desire for knowledge and understanding.
So you shouldn't treat it like a game or a party trick.
Exactly. Yeah, if you're not taking it seriously,
Yeah.
the results might not be meaningful or accurate.
Okay, so you have to be open to the messages
Uh-huh.
and approach it with a certain level of reverence.
Yeah, I think that's important.
Okay, but what about when you get a confusing answer?
Right.
Or like the results just don't seem to make sense?
Well, sometimes the timing isn't right.
Okay.
Or there might be conflicting energies at play.
Okay.
So it's always a good idea to try again later
Okay.
or to use a different method.
So you can kind of like cross-reference different methods.
Exactly, yeah, to get a clearer perspective.
Okay, that's a good tip. But I have to ask, like, does divination actually predict the future?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And there's no easy answer.
Okay.
But I think it's important to remember that divination is a tool.
Okay.
It's not a crystal ball. It doesn't reveal a fixed destiny.
So it's not like set in stone.
Exactly. Yeah, there's always room for free will.
So it's more about understanding the potential outcomes.
Right, based on the energies and choices that are present in the moment.
Okay, so it's like saying, if you continue down this path, here's what you might encounter.
Exactly, yeah. It gives you a chance to course correct,
Okay.
to make different choices.
So it's less about fortune telling and more about understanding possibilities.
Right, and empowering yourself to create the future that you desire.
Wow. I love that. So it's really about taking ownership of your journey
Exactly.
and using divination as a guide, not a dictator.
I like that. Yeah, guide, not a dictator.
This is so much more than just like predicting whether you're going to win the lottery or meet your soulmate.
Right.
It's about using these techniques to understand ourselves and the world around us on a deeper level.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a journey of self-discovery.
Man, we've covered so much ground.
It's a huge topic.
Yeah, it really is, but it's so fascinating. I feel like we've only just scratched the surface.
There's so much more to explore.
Yeah, but even just this like introductory overview has been so eye-opening.
I think one of the things that's really striking is just how long these practices have been around.
Yeah.
You know, centuries, millennia even.
And yet they're still relevant today.
Right. I mean, people are still drawn to these methods.
Yeah, absolutely.
For guidance, for insight, for understanding.
So it's like a timeless human need.
It really is.
To connect with something beyond ourselves.
Yeah, something bigger.
Yeah. Okay, so we've talked about all these different methods and we've talked about the different types of responses. But I'm wondering, like, is there a right way to interpret the results of divination?
That's a great question.
Because it seems like there's a lot of room for personal interpretation.
There is, and that's why discernment is so important.
Okay.
You know, you have to be aware of your own biases.
Right.
You have to understand the limitations of the method you're using. And it's always good to consider multiple interpretations.
Okay, so it's not about just blindly accepting whatever comes up.
Exactly, yeah. You have to think critically about the information.
Okay, so it's like a process.
It is. It's not just like a one-and-done kind of thing.
Right. It's something you have to really like sit with and think about.
Exactly.
And like, how does it apply to my specific situation?
Right. Because what might be true for one person might not be true for another.
So it's really about taking ownership of your own interpretation.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a very personal thing.
Okay, so what does this all mean for our listeners? Like, why should they care about divination?
Well, I think it offers a unique and powerful way
Okay.
to engage with the unknown,
Yeah.
to explore potential futures,
Okay.
and to gain valuable insights into ourselves
Yeah.
and the world around us.
It's about like deepening our understanding of like the forces that shape our lives.
Exactly. Yeah, it's about seeing those connections.
All right, so as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of divination, I want to leave you with some questions to ponder.
Okay.
What divination method speaks to you the most? What question would you ask an oracle if you had the chance?
Ooh, good question.
And could exploring your own personal symbolism
Yeah.
deepen your connection to yourself and the world around you?
Lots to think about.
Yeah, well, it's been a fascinating journey.
It has been.
Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into the mysteries of divination.
Until next time.
See ya.